Hey guys, here we are again. Hope you're doing well. And we just continue on, don't we? Day by day, we keep on plugging away. I think it's very fitting today. We're going to be looking at the books of poetry. The books of poetry. We're going to bop over just for a little bit from the books of history to talk about the books of poetry. The reason why I'm doing this is because David is the guy that wrote most of the Psalms, and we just did the life of David the last time we were together. So I thought it might be kind of fitting to see what he wrote. And then we'll look at David and Solomon and some of the stuff he wrote. And then the next week, we'll go into the Kings and stuff. We'll go back into the history again. I'll make sure you understand which books are history and which books are poetry before the end, so you'll get that all right on the final exam. So hope things are going well for you. Let me see if I can share my screen, and then we will be in business. Oh, here we go. This is it. The books of poetry, which would be Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. Now, remember, Saul was the first king of Israel. Remember that guy? Who was a crummy king, though. And then David comes along. He's the second king of Israel. He's the one that writes most of the Psalms. And then his son, Solomon, comes along as the third king of Israel. And he's the guy that writes most of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. All right? So let's take a look at the Psalms. Then we'll look at Proverbs, then Ecclesiastes, and touch base briefly on Song of Solomon. So Psalms is like 150 different songs. It's like the Hebrew hymnal. Like it's like the song book. They didn't have PowerPoint and stuff like that. So, but they had the scroll that had the Psalms in them. And the Jewish people would sing them. These were all like hymns and songs like we sing in chapel and stuff. 150 of them. So you don't say like Psalms chapter 43, because there really isn't a chapter really in the Psalms. Each Psalm is individual. So it would be the 43rd Psalm or the second Psalm or the 23rd Psalm. It's not Psalms chapter 23, it's Psalm 23. You see, because each one's an individual psalm. The Hebrew for Psalms is telechim, which means songs of praise. In the Greek, it's psalmoi, and that's where we get our word psalm, psalmoi, which means sacred songs sung to musical instruments. They actually had stringed instruments and stuff, and cymbals, loud clanging cymbals. They were rocking way before people were rocking in the United States. David wrote about half of the Psalms. 73 of them are attributed to David. There are some that to Solomon. There's actually a psalm devoted to Moses, one of his songs. There are a couple of others. Asaph, who was like a musician in the temple, or not the temple, but with the, like with one of David's chief musicians. And the sons of Korah also were musicians that worked with David. And so they wrote the Psalms. But David is the one that you want to think of, who is the primary author of the Psalms, writing almost half of them. Now, there are like 5 different types of Psalms, right? There's Psalms of praise, Psalms of thanksgiving, Psalms of lament, imprecatory Psalms, and pilgrim Psalms. Pilgrim songs are also called the Psalms of Ascent. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you in your assignment give me an example of each one of those kinds of psalms. You'll have to kind of Google search it to find, like, what is a praise psalm? What is a thanksgiving psalm? What is an example of one that's a lament? A lament is one expressing deep sorrow or grief or trouble. Things are really, really, really bad, and I don't know what I'm going to do. But even in the Psalms of lament, there's always a moment of hope that pops up. Sometimes it's in the middle of it. Sometimes it's at the very end of it. Almost always it ends with a word of hope. But there's this crushing, difficult time. And the psalmist speaks to this hardship, but then God gives me strength. Imprecatory psalms are like angry psalms. They're like psalms calling for justice or vengeance. So it'll be like, smite them, O Lord, crush their bones, crash them, smash their heads against the rocks. These are the psalms that they don't usually use for funeral services and church services and stuff. But they are like a call from the deep angst that we might have in our hearts, like of anger over something that's not right. All of us have felt that, and Psalms expresses it. So the Psalms are very emotional. They express deep down the emotions of the heart. The Psalms of Ascent are psalms that were sung while they went up to Jerusalem to worship, when people would gather together and they would sing songs of praise. A lot of times the travelers would sing as they were traveling. They were pilgrims making their journey to Jerusalem. And there are several psalms that are called these pilgrim songs, or the Psalms of Ascent. And they would be travel psalms. Do you guys have any travel songs? Maybe like 100 bottles of beer on the wall, 100 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around, 99 bottles of beer. Well, that's like one of those, except for these are a lot more meaningful than 100 bottles of beer on the wall. Psalms of Ascent. The book of Psalms is divided into 5 books, 5 kinds of books. The first 41 Psalms it basically says God is beside us. He's right beside us. Then the second one is God is before us. He opens up the doorway. He creates a path for us. Psalm 73 to 89, God is all the way around us. He surrounds us. Psalm 90 to 106, God is up above us. And then Psalm 107 to 150, God is among us. He's with us and among us as we sing his praises. You know, the Psalms are the greatest source of comfort in the Bible. And today, through the hardship that we've been going through as a nation and in the world, we need comfort and we need strength. And there is a psalm, you can find one. Just dig around, look in the Psalms, and you're going to find a comforting psalm. I'm going to have you do that as part of the assignment. Find a psalm of comfort, something that brings encouragement and comfort to your heart. You find that and you put that, that'll be a part of this week's assignment. I've used psalms in the 300 and some funerals that I've done. Every time I use a psalm. The psalms are so meaningful. They speak peace to my heart. Even just this morning, I was reading in the Bible, I read a psalm, and it encouraged me, it helped me, and it'll do that for you too. What a blessing, what a source of comfort for us. The Psalms answer this question: who is my God? Who is my God? And whatever your God is, that is your source of strength, security, or significance. Whatever that is, that's what your God is. So if you turn to money for your security, your significance, and your strength, then your money is your God. If you turn to popularity for your strength, security, and significance, then your popularity is your God. But if the Lord, the rock, Jehovah, Jesus, if he's your source, your strength, and your security, then he's your God. And the Psalms remind us that he is our strength. He is our security. He is our significance. He is our God. The Psalms really are poetry. And we're going to study more about poetry a little bit later when we talk about the prophets, but this is really it. That's why these books, these specific books, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, are called the poetic books because of the poetry in them. And there are different kinds of poetry, different forms of poetry. And for your assignment, I'm going to have you pick one of these and actually create one, create a poem somehow using the form that the psalmist would use. You can pretend like you're a psalmist and use one of those forms of poetry to write a little something or other. It doesn't have to be any good, just needs to follow the rules. So a synonymous poem, synonymous poetry is like it says the same thing and it says it 2 times, right? It says it 2 times. Let me give an example. Psalm 3:1. Let me pull it up here for you. Psalm chapter 3, verse 1. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? See, how many are my foes? That's one. How many rise up against me? That's 2. So it says the same thing twice. It does that over and over and over and over again. You just see it like multiple times in the Psalms. Um, Antithetical poetry has 2 lines, but they're the opposite of each other. So it's not the same thing twice, it's the opposite thing in the second line. So, like, this is an example from Psalm 34:10. 34:10. It says, the lions may grow weak and hungry. Ian, you'll like that, won't you? The Detroit Lions. The lions may grow weak and hungry. That's the one side. But those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. See, that's the good side. So it's the opposite. The lions grow weak and hungry. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. It's an opposite. So it should make one line about one thing and then flip it upside down and then say the other. And then there's synthetic poetry. Synthetic poetry is where there's a line or an idea that's just repeated over and over and over again, and it builds. So look at this from Psalm 139, 1 through 6. This is synthetic poetry. And it's let's look for the repeat, okay? And what's it doing? It's not saying the same thing over and over again. It's not saying the opposite thing. It just keeps building. So it goes, Psalm 139. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit. You know when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern, or you know, my going out and my lying down, and you are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before, you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain it. You see it? You have searched me. You know me. You know when I sit. You know when I rise. You know my thoughts from afar. You know my lying down. You know, so you see how it goes? So it just keeps saying it and just keeps adding. It's synthetic. It keeps building. It's bringing things, a whole bunch of things together under one common theme. You know, you know, you know, you know, you know. So synonymous, same thing twice. Antithetical says the opposite, first one line and then the opposite second line. Synthetic says repeats the same idea over and over and over again, but adding to it and giving different expressions, but coming back to the same idea, the same line. Another form of poetry in the Psalms is acrostic of the Hebrew alphabet. Psalm 119, which is the longest chapter in the Bible. Don't memorize that one. Whatever you do, it'll drive you bonkers. I do know a guy that memorized it once. He's on that. Anyway, Psalm 119 takes every letter of the Hebrew alphabet and then writes a whole bunch about the law of God, the Torah, for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Another one is Psalm 145, which is pretty cool, and it's a lot shorter. And this is about God's greatness and his goodness, Psalm 145. And it starts with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It ends with the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. One verse per letter, pretty much, except, this is amazing, right in the middle of Psalm 145, there's a missing letter. It's gone. It just disappeared. So the question is, what happened? Where did that letter go? Why isn't it there? And scholars have debated it, studied it, but this is what most think, that the reason why that missing letter right in the middle, the noon, the N, the letter N, where it's supposed to be, it's not there. The reason why in God's, sometimes when we think about God's greatness and his goodness, that's the theme of Psalm 145. Sometimes when we think about his greatness and his goodness, sometimes it seems like he's missing still. Like if God is so great and he's so good, then why do bad things happen? And there's stuff that doesn't make sense, like the missing nun, like what's going on with this coronavirus thing. Right in the middle of what we're living, right in the middle of everything, God's greatness and goodness seems to be missing, but it is not missing. It is still there. And it comes right back around and it says it again and again and again. The Jewish people call Psalm 145 Ashari, which means happy. It's the happy psalm. And they repeated that psalm every single day. Orthodox Jewish people still today repeat that. And every time Jewish people gather for worship, they do Psalm 145, reminding themselves that they can be happy in God, even when there's a missing piece that we don't quite understand. Another form of poetry in the Psalms is chiasm, or the chiastic structure. Um, and a chiasm, um, it goes along this line. It's like it goes A and then B to C. Sometimes there's a D, and then it backs up and it goes C to B and back to A. All right. A, B, C, maybe D, C, B, A. Chiasms are all over the Bible, in the prophets. They're in Psalms and a whole bunch of places. Psalm 1 will do this, right? Psalm 1. Let's see if we can just take a look at a chiastic structure from Psalm 1. Here we go. Okay, blessed is the man who does not walk in the steps of the wicked, or stand in the way of the sinners, or sit in the seat of the scoffer, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates in his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by the rivers of water, which yields fruit in its season. Okay, so the person who walks in, who does not walk in step with the wicked, that's A. That person is blessed, right? Right? Blessed is that person who does not stand with the wicked and all that, and sit with scoffers, who delights in the law of the Lord, is like a tree. So the A is the righteous person, who's not who's not with the bad guys, who delights in God's law. Um, um, and then C is like a tree planted by streams of water, and who yields fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither, whatever they prosper. Not so the wicked. All right, so we're going to flip sides now. They are like chaff. They're not like a tree. They're like a chaff, right? So there's C, back again, C, not a tree, but chaff, like chaff that the wind blows away. B, they will not stand in the judgment of sinners or in the assemblies of the righteous. A, the Lord, instead of blessed, the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. So blessed is the one, it was the first A. The way of the wicked leads to destruction is the second A. The first A does not stand in the way of sinners or sit in the company of mockers. And then with the B side for the sinner people is they will not stand in the judgment. All right, they will not stand in the assembly of the righteous. And then C for the righteous people is like a tree that plants fruit in its season. And the C for the wicked people is like, it's like chaff that the wind blows away. I don't know if that, I think I might have just thoroughly confused you. I hope not. I actually wrote a chiastic structure. This might be helpful for you. A, social media ranting. B, wastes time. C, makes enemies. C, repeat C, to make friends. B, and to redeem time. A, post social media blessings. You see it? A, B, C, C, B, A. Now here's an example from Psalm 110. This is like the whole chapter of Psalm 110, the whole psalm. So God establishes the kingdom, that's A. B, he sent forth to conquer. You see that in verse 2. Verse 3, it's in the day of power. And then D, this one has a D in it. Yeah, God makes an unbreakable oath, a vow. So then in the day of wrath, so day of wrath kind of corresponds to day of power. B, he goes out to conquer, corresponding with B, he's sent to conquer. A, God or Yahweh establishes the king. So it goes all the way back to A again. A, B, C, C, B, A. That's called a chiasm or a chiastic structure. Now there's one more in the Psalms that I want to talk about. That's metaphor. Metaphor. This is imagery, poetry, pictures, word pictures. So, like, there's a ton of these in the Psalms, like images, pictures, and they're not to be taken literally, right? They're not literal, um, but they mean something. So, Psalm 91. Psalm 91, by the way, is a great psalm for the virus because it talks about no disaster, no plague will come near your dwelling, no disaster will come near your tent. I'm praying that for you. But Psalm 91:4 it says, He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart, whatever a rampart is. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you'll find um, refuge. But like God doesn't really have feathers. Like he's not a big chicken in the sky. It isn't like that. He doesn't, he doesn't have feathers. Um, but it's an image of a feather, like a mother hen taking little baby chicks under her wings and making sure that they're safe and secure. So that's imagery. So in your assignment, what I want you to do is figure out one of those Hebrew poetry things and make one for me. You can do the synonymous or antithetical. You can do an ABC kind of thing. You could do that in the English language, not Hebrew. An acrostic. You could do. If you want to be brave, try a chiastic structure: A B C C B A, or do a metaphor like something and a something. God is like this to me. That would be a good way too. So whatever you want to say, whatever you want to do, don't worry. I'm not going to grade you too hard on it. I just want you to try. All right, book of Proverbs. Proverbs is written by Solomon. And at least one part of it was copied by King Hezekiah a whole lot later because it says that. Um, Also, there are a couple of chapters in here, Agur and Lemuel, who write Proverbs, but mostly it is Solomon, who is called the wisest man who ever lived. And we'll talk more about him the next time. Probably the reason why he was so wise is because he had so many wives and they gave him good advice. The question for Proverbs is, how do I live my life? Remember, Psalms is, who is God? Who is my God? Proverbs, how do I live my life? And the answer that Solomon gives is find wisdom, gain understanding. Wisdom is applying knowledge. That is wisdom. And so the whole book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. So, like, this is probably the best one. In fact, some of you guys use this for your soul, but several of you use this one already. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him or acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Now, that's wisdom. So, Proverbs is like common sense. It's like Chinese fortune cookies. And do I have, yeah, there they are, Chinese fortune cookies. No one is happy who does not think himself so. It's like Yoda is saying stuff. And so, like these little snippets, a lot of times they're totally unrelated to each other. They're just random and they're wisdom. They're wisdom. There are 31 Proverbs, chapters in the book of Proverbs, one for each day of the month, really. Um, and so, like they're kind of like Chinese fortune cookies. They give you a little snippet of just good, old fashioned, common sense wisdom. Now, these are guidances, they're not promises. Like one proverb says, train up a child in the way we should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. That's not necessarily a promise. I mean, there are a lot of good parents who've raised up their children the way they should go, and still they got old and they departed from it. But basically, what Proverbs is saying is train up the child in the way they should go. And actually, that means according to the bent that they were made of who they really are. And then they're going to live fully and be the best version of who they are. That's kind of what that means. It's like good common sense. If you give good grounding to a child, it's much more likely that child will do better when they're an adult. So if you want some good common sense, wisdom. Proverbs 31. You see that lady? That's my sweetheart. That's Kathy. She's awesome. I love her so very much. That's us on Main Street in Hayward, our little town. I used to call Kathy CP31. You know, like in Star Wars, there's C3PO. Well, I called her CP31, Kathy the Proverbs 31 woman. The Proverbs 31 woman. It is quite an awesome uh, passage. Let me see if I can find it here quick for you. Proverbs 31 talks about a wife of noble character who can find. She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax. She works with eager hands. She does. She is like the merchant ships bringing food from afar. She runs to the grocery store and brings food from afar. She gets up while it's still night. She provides food for her family. She portions for her female servants. She considers a field. She buys it. She's good at business. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are not are strong for her task. So her lamp does not go out at night. She's just always at the needle sewing, and she opens up her arms to the poor. She extends her hands generously. When it snows, she has no fear for her household. All of them are taken care of. Um, she makes good coverings for her beds. Her husband is respected in the city gate, where he takes a seat among the elders. She's clothed with strength and dignity, can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with faithful instruction upon her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household. She does not eat the bread of idleness, and her children rise up and call her blessed. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. In fact, a lot of times on Mother's Day, I would use that for my Mother's Day sermon, but I didn't realize how depressing that would be for all the moms. Then one day I was actually doing a study of Proverbs pretty deep, and I read a Bible scholar who unpacked it for me and said Proverbs 31 is not even a real person. It's a personification, it's a metaphor, it's an imagery, it's a metaphor for wisdom. The Proverbs 31 woman is wisdom. He's not even talking about his mother or his wife. He's talking about maybe his mother and his wife as a metaphor for wisdom. It's about wisdom that helps us to take care of things and work hard and be smart and get up early and stay up late if you have to and get the job done and be kind and generous and wisdom. I thought it was CP31. I thought it was Kathy. I went and I said, Kathy, you're not going to believe this. I figured out Psalm Proverbs 31. It's wisdom. And she goes, I figured that out a long time ago. I was just tolerating you saying all that stuff. Anyway, Proverbs 31 is wisdom. And it really sums up the entire book of Proverbs, saying if you can capture this, wisdom is like a wife to you. If you can capture wisdom, your life will be a whole lot better. Ecclesiastes. Um, Solomon is considered the author of Ecclesiastes, and the question for Ecclesiastes is, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? But it's a depressing book. It's pretty depressing. In fact, he says it over and over again. Solomon says, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. The King James says, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. What's the use? What's the use? We make our money, we work really hard, and then we die. It says rich people, poor people, people who work hard, people that don't. We work hard and then we die. Meaningless, meaningless. All is meaningless. Um, but it's still embedded in there. It says there is some meaning, and the meaning of life is hang on just a sec. The meaning of life is to enjoy life and to honor God is really what it says. Have faith, honor God, enjoy your loved ones, the people that you love the very most, and just live into your life. Live into it the best that you can, because this is the only life we have here on earth. Proverbs 3, 1 through 8 says, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. And I think the Birds had a song about that. Uh-oh, where'd that go? I don't see it. Oh, there they are. Um, I'm not going to worry about that. But this was an old song back when I was a kid. This was like the number one song, and these guys were like the Beatles. So the Birds, they sang like the Beatles did, and they sang Proverbs 3. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn, turn. A time for every purpose under heaven. And then it talked about a time to love, and a time to live, and a time to die, and a time to laugh, and a time to mourn. There's a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, like during the coronavirus. To everything, there's a season. And then it says, and he makes everything beautiful in its time. What is the meaning of life is Ecclesiastes. Song of Solomon, this is our last one. What does it mean to be captivated by love? Song of Solomon, what does it mean to be captivated by love? Song of Solomon is erotic poetry. It's a celebration of sexual, marital love. Solomon, who's in love and he's expressing in vivid detail his love affair and his lover and all about her. And many Old Testament scholars say this is a metaphor for our relationship with God and his love for us. Um, but if you think that like God is against intimacy or that kind of love, well then you've missed it, because Song of Solomon speaks about that. It's definitely R-rated. Um, wow, it's steamy kind of stuff, but it just reminds us of how important it is to love our spouse well, to marry well, and to love well, and that sexuality is a gift from God to be expressed within our marriage relationship. Oh, I'm going to show you something here as soon as I stop share. Speaking of imagery and metaphor, we talked about that. This is one from Song of Solomon. If Song of Solomon was literal, if you took it literally, it would look something like this, right? It's like, how beautiful you are, my darling, how beautiful. And I don't know if you can see it or not, like your hair's like the goats of Sharon. Let's see. Oh, your neck is like an ivory tower. I think it says your breasts are like two fawns grazing in a gazelle. Two gazelles, I mean, grazing. Let's see. Oh, your lips are dripping honey. Anyway, therefore, yeah, that is all metaphor. All metaphor. All right, take a look at the assignment and just do the stuff, write the poem, and just do 2 or 3 other little questions, and you turn that in, you'll get all your points. God bless you. Have a good one. Bye.